All right. Okay, it's a little bit before 1, so I'm not going to get started just yet. I know that people are going to be signing on, and if you are having trouble with the YouTube feed, you may want to try refreshing or closing your browser and reopening with that link. So I'll just give everyone a minute to kind of get themselves together and organized before I dive in. I have some delicious tea on this cold, frosty day. And if you live in Raleigh, then you know we're expecting more snow tonight, potentially. The weather report this morning was basically like, we'll either get some wintry mix or 6 inches of snow. And so who knows? But my daughter is at home. So if you hear miscellaneous noises, then just know that she is on a rocket ship on her way to Saturn. She is supervised. If any of you have kids, I know you understand what it's like. So anyway, she is on a rocket ship on her way to Saturn, and I am here on a mission to take you to the most loving, happy relationship of your life. So it's now 1 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the broadcast. And if you're coming in late or you're having trouble, don't worry, you will get a link to the free replay, so you'll be able to watch this again. I believe all of you got the free husband training ebook, so I hope you've had a chance to take a look at that. But that also talks about most of what I'm going to discuss here today. So that's another thing to review if you want some review. I'd also just like to say right up front, if you find yourself and you have questions, or you feel like this could help you, but you're not exactly sure how to apply it, then I'd love to talk to you. You can go to talkwithelaine.com. And I'm actually just going to adjust my lower third here. And that way you'll just have it in front of you. Talkwithelaine.com. So let me off, on. There. So now you can see my website. You can book an absolutely free call. I would love to talk to you. I would love to hear about your situation, what you're dealing with, and help you discern, is this a boundary issue or is it a communication issue, and how can you get it resolved? And the thing about husband training is it's a joke. The word is a joke. It's a joke term, and it's a family joke. And it's this kind of joke of, I've been training my husband for so long and he's so well trained. And it's a joke. And what it's about, what I really mean when I say husband training, is how to create a relationship with your husband that is respect-filled and loving and nag-free, but also doesn't involve you just giving up all of your desires or your voice. I believe that marriage is a beautiful partnership between two people, and that both people need to be able to freely express their needs and their wants and their desires. So that's my mindset around marriage. And so this is really, it's not really training per se. What I like to say is this is a great way to begin to influence your husband's behavior and change your interactions with your husband solely by changing the way you communicate, so that your marriage becomes happier and more loving and more respectful. So that's really the purpose behind what I'm talking about. And I always do a disclaimer when I'm talking about relationships. If there's a power struggle or any kind of abuse, and including emotional abuse, if you feel like you're constantly in a power struggle with your husband, or you have any sense of fear or uncertainty or anxiety, this may not be for you. You may be in a relationship that has some bigger, deeper issues. In that case, I would recommend you call Interactive Wake County or a domestic violence abuse helpline. So just going to get that right out of the way first. This also works well if you're dealing with teens, peers. A lot of these techniques can be used in any of your relationships. So the husband or wife or spouse is a great place to do it, though, because you're with those people all the time and you really want those relationships to be preserved. So we're going to dive right on in, husband training. And I want to talk just a little bit about communication to start with. And there's 4 basic steps to communication. There is the encoding process where your brain takes an idea and codes it into words. Then there's and that's the speaking. Step 2 is when you speak those words. Step 3 is hearing. I hear your words. And then step 4 is decoding. My brain hears your words and decodes them into a concept or an idea. And this normally works really well for people. You'll find that some people you communicate with more easily than others. You know, there's always that person who says exactly what you were about to say. You guys are really on the same wavelength. And what that really means is your encoding and decoding is just very, very similar. But this is where communication can break down, because there's 4 steps there. There's the encoding. So if it doesn't get encoded into language that's clear enough, there's a problem. There's hearing. You have to hear it accurately. If there's a kid screaming, or you have hearing loss, or they're slurring their words, there can be a problem with the hearing. Then there's the decoding. You have to have the same understanding of those words that the other person's speaking. And you know, this may seem like really basic stuff, but just have an example. So my husband does not like clutter. And to him, clutter is when there are things on a horizontal surface, that's clutter. So he might come home and see a bunch of stuff on our dining room table and say, and think and his brain encodes that as the table's dirty, it needs to be cleaned. And he would make the request, hey, can you clean off the dining room table? Or can you clean up the dining room? So he's encoded this idea of clutter as a request to clean. And I hear a request to clean. Well, when I hear the word clean, I think about housework. So I'm going to take the tablecloth up and put a fresh tablecloth down and, you know, wipe off any stains and maybe polish our salt shakers and put fresh napkins on the table and do all this work. And then I'll neatly take all of the stuff that was stacked up on the table and put it in neat little stacks on the end of the table we don't use. And now we have a communication problem because he made a request and I fulfilled it, but he's not happy because there's still stuff on the dining room table. So he's unhappy with me, and then I'm unhappy because I did all this work and he's still unhappy. What does he want? I'm not his maid. So you can see how something so simple can fall into miscommunication. So one way to avoid that is to be very specific. You know, my husband, instead of saying, can you clean up the dining room table, should have said, can we find a place for all this stuff to go? Can you clean all the stuff off the dining room table? Can you clear the dining room table? Or I could ask a clarifying question. I could say, when you say clean the table, that's a fresh tablecloth. So what are you talking about? What needs to be cleaned? And then he would say, oh, all those books. So you can see how in communication, being very specific is useful, and also asking questions. And those are both really great communication tools. If you're ever unsure of something, just ask questions. So that's sort of the basics of communication. A big obstacle to healthy and effective communication is this belief that you can read minds. And we're not mind readers. Again, it goes back to this encoding, decoding process. Yes, you might be on the same wavelength. Absolutely. But you can't actually know the concept in another person's head. You can only know what they can communicate to you. So when you're dealing with an issue, there are some red flag phrases. Things like, but he should know, or, well, we've been together for 10 years, or why do I have to tell him everything? Why should I have to tell him I want flowers for Valentine's Day? Or, isn't it obvious? Look at this house. How can he not know that I need help cleaning it? Or, he didn't come right out and say it, but I'm pretty sure. Those are red flags. If you are upset about something and those are the phrases that are leading into your violation or your upset, you need to stop and say, okay, how do I really know? Think about the source. If it's a should statement, well, why should I tell him I want flowers for Valentine's Day? Should is kind of a bad word. I try to just get rid of, I try not to use the word should anymore at all. The fact of the matter is, if you want flowers for Valentine's Day and he never gets them unless you ask, it's just easier to say, hey, I really would like flowers for Valentine's Day. And by the way, Valentine's Day is 2 weeks from now. Simple as that. And yeah, I know it would be more romantic if he swept you off your feet and offered you flowers, but that's TV. That's not real life. And real life is infinitely better and more fun. So yeah, so what if you have to ask him for flowers? Everyone's going to be happy and you're going to have flowers. So another thing to think about is, how do you know something? For example, someone might say, well, I know my husband, I want to take ballroom dance lessons, but I know my husband isn't going to go for that. How do you know that? Do you know that because he said, dear wife, I will never take ballroom dancing lessons with you? Or was it that you were watching TV and you came across a ballroom dance competition and he said, oh gosh, change the channel, I hate ballroom dancing? If it was just because he asked you to change the channel, that doesn't mean he's not willing to take ballroom dancing with you. And what I find with most people is what they know is not because the husband or the other person came to them and said, I will not do this thing with you. It's because they don't like something, or they've expressed a distaste for it or something like that. And then you just go to them and say, look, I really want to take ballroom dancing lessons, but I kind of think that you hate ballroom dancing. Do you hate ballroom dancing? Would you be willing to take dancing lessons with me? And maybe he'll say, yeah, I hate ballroom dancing, but I really like salsa. Can we do salsa? Hey, look at the progress you just made by asking a question. So I want you to keep that in mind when we talk about boundaries and powerful requests, which is the last couple of pieces of this training. It's always great to ask questions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. Nothing wrong at all. There's also nothing wrong with being very specific. So back to the ballroom dancing lesson. There could be a lot of reasons that you want to take ballroom dancing lessons with your husband. Maybe you want a regular date night. Maybe you've always wanted to do a ballroom dance. Maybe you just want to do some kind of dancing with your husband. So the other thing you can do is you can be specific. You can say, I really want to have a regular weekly activity with you that involves physical activity. I think it would be fun if we did that by taking ballroom dancing lessons. What do you think? But you've laid out a weekly physical activity shared with the husband. See, so now he's clear about exactly what is it that you want. So again, communication. Always remember, be specific and ask clarification questions. So moving on to our second point, which is boundaries. I love, 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 love boundaries. I love them. They're the best. I highly recommend the original Boundaries book. It's by Drs. Cloud and Townsend, and it's just called Boundaries. But if you go to their website, cloudtownsend.com, you can actually, they have a whole series of boundaries books, boundaries on dating, boundaries with kids, all kinds of boundaries. It's really great work. Boundaries are anything that define ownership and responsibility. So any limit you set that defines what you own and what you're responsible for is a boundary. Boundaries are permeable. They let good things in and out, but they also protective. They keep bad things out. It's kind of like skin. The skin on my hand defines very clearly where my hand starts and finishes. It lets good things in, like lotion. It keeps bad things out, like bacteria, unless I have a cut. So, and we set boundaries all the time. We set boundaries through our behavior, and we set boundaries through our words. So this is something you're already doing. We also set boundaries through our actions, which is behavior. I highly recommend using words. When you really have an issue that you're trying to deal with, I think words are the best way to go. And again, being very specific and being very clear. It's important to remember that boundaries will not control behavior, and they will not determine a particular outcome. You cannot change your husband. You just can't. You cannot use a boundary to create one specific outcome from a problem. And you cannot use boundaries to control another person's behavior. Okay? What boundaries do is influence behavior. So boundaries influence behavior. They change your dynamic. And we will talk about what to do. If you want a very particular outcome, I'm going to give you a tool, what I call the powerful request, which is a really great way to ask for something that you want specifically. Boundaries are much more about what are you responsible for, what are you owning, and what do you not own. So the chore wars, right? Who does what around the house? Boundaries are the secret to eliminating the chore wars from your marriage. It's important to remember boundaries change over time. And kids are the perfect example of this. When you have a baby, there are basically no boundaries. That little infant is responsible for nothing because they're completely, they're floppy little babies. They can't do anything. At a certain point, your child might be potty trained, at which case you are no longer responsible for their bathroom needs. You don't have to change your diapers anymore. The boundary has shifted. At some point, your child will begin bathing herself or himself, and that will become a boundary. They will no longer want you in the bathroom with them, washing their bodies. The boundary will be put in place. So you have to remember, boundaries do change. So when you set up boundaries around chores and household tasks, remember that periodically you're going to want to revisit those, see what makes sense, maybe shift the boundaries around. So here's a story that I like to use about boundary setting. I've mentioned that my husband doesn't like clutter. Very tidy man, or so I thought when we got married. And then I noticed after we got married that by the end of the week, there was a bunch of clothes on the floor next to his bed. Thought that was strange. And I was doing the laundry, and that was my responsibility. I did all the laundry. And so the first couple times I did laundry, I would go there and I'd pick up clothes and I'd sniff them to see if they were dirty, and some of them were dirty and some of them weren't dirty, and some of them he was sleeping in. And I was like, I don't know what's going on with these clothes. And so, I was like, I can't figure this out to do laundry. So I set a boundary. I said, look, here's the deal. I don't know what's going on with all of this. I don't know what's clean. I don't know what's not clean. So from here on out, I'm only going to wash clothes that are in your dirty clothes hamper. That's it. I set the boundary. So the boundary said, I am responsible for washing clothes that are in your hamper. I am not responsible for any clothes that are not in the hamper. See how I just set that boundary? I wasn't angry about it. And, I knew that there were 3 potential results of me setting that boundary. And the first one was that he would put all of his dirty clothes in the hamper and there would be no more clothes on the bedroom floor. That was a potential result. A second potential result would be that he would never put clothes in the hamper, in which case eventually he would run out of clean clothes. Well, guess what? I married a grown-up. He can do laundry if he wants to. And the third result was that he would put some clothes in the hamper and leave some clothes on the floor. And I was okay with all of that. I honestly didn't care. I'm fine with clutter. I am not the neat person in our relationship. So clothes on the floor don't really bother me. What bothered me was having to try to figure out if all of them needed to be washed. So I set the boundary around that. And I was fine with the results. So I just want to remind you, no matter what you do, whether you nag, threaten, punish, reward, or set boundaries, you cannot control the behavior of others. I could not control my husband. All I could do was influence his behavior. The other thing about setting boundaries is that as opposed to nagging, threatening, punishing, rewarding. It's healthy, but it also creates meaningful conversations. When I set that boundary with my husband, I'm only going to wash clothes that are in your dirty clothes hamper, I communicated I respected him as an adult who was capable of cleaning up after himself. He didn't need me to do that. He's an adult. I reminded him that I care about him enough to do his laundry. I love you. I want to give you clean clothes. This is one of the chores that I enjoy doing. I also communicated that I didn't know what to do about the clothes on the floor. I didn't know how to decode them, and I didn't want to try. And that was his responsibility. It was much more productive than either nagging him or picking up after him being resentful. Now, this illustrates a couple of potential pitfalls with boundaries. So these are your two big mistakes, most common mistakes when making boundaries. And if you go to my blog at soulcourse.com, you'll see that this week I actually wrote a blog post about the two most common mistakes you make when setting boundaries. So do not bluff, okay? Don't bluff. Remember when I said I saw 3 potential outcomes to setting my boundary and I was okay with all 3 of them? If you're not okay with all the potential outcomes, then you're bluffing and they will call your bluff. The second one is don't undermine your boundary. Let the situation play out. If my husband had completely run out of clean clothes, he would have had to do the laundry himself. Maybe he would have liked that. Maybe he wouldn't have. But it would have affected his future decisions because he would remember the next time he went to change clothes, oh, I need to put this in my hamper or else I'm going to have to wash it. So you want to let the situation play out completely. Let the person experience the full consequences of the boundary and make his or her own decisions. That's what's so empowering about setting a boundary is when you say, I'm not responsible. You are responsible for this. You are in control of this. And let it go. And that person is empowered to handle it however she or he wants to, which is awesome. Now, so that's how you deal with boundaries. That's how you set boundaries. And you can do this with any chore. Taking out the trash. I'm not going to take out the trash anymore. And when you're having these boundary setting conversations, you can set expectations. So you could say something like, I'm not taking out the trash anymore because I sprained my ankle and I can't carry it down the steps or whatever. And say, but I would like it to go out every week. Or you could say things like, today when I was cooking, I ended up putting the carcass of a raw chicken in the garbage. You may want to take that out before it starts to stink. Clear communication like that is fine around boundaries. That's not nagging, that's giving information. And you want to do it in a way that you're giving information. So you don't want to say, honey, please remember to take out the trash tonight with a tone and an eye roll. You want to say, hey, honey, just FYI, there's a raw chicken carcass in the garbage. It's probably going to get stinky at some point. Just wanted to let you know. And then you shut up. Just be quiet. And that's what contributes to the empowering of your other partner. And that's what communicates that respect and that love. So many times I see women killing themselves to take care of their husbands. And you hear the jokes all the time. Somebody who has 2 kids says, well, I actually have 3 kids, right? My husband. And yeah, it's a joke. But honestly, you're married to an adult. And by treating him or her as an adult and empowering him or her to make choices and solve their own problems, you're bringing respect and love into the relationship. So, if you start thinking about boundaries and you realize that there are 1 or more outcomes that are just absolutely unacceptable to you, then setting a boundary is not the right tool. So, for example, if you're going to set a boundary about washing dishes and it's absolutely unacceptable to you that you'll have dishes in the sink for a week, don't set a boundary. That's not a good situation to set a boundary for because you're going to become angry when the outcome is different from the one you want. Okay? And if you're going to get angry about any of the potential outcomes around a boundary, then you don't want to set a boundary. You want to make what I call a powerful request. Well, you have one other option. The other option would be to take responsibility for it. So I could have taken responsibility for the clothes on the floor. But I only recommend that course of action if you are able to do it without any resentment or anger. If you feel resentment or anger around it, then don't do it, because that's going to lead to disrespect in your marriage. So if you can't take responsibility without being angry about it, then you want to make a request. So the elements of a great request: own your own desire. Be totally clear and upfront. This is what I want. I want this. And the reason I say to do this is for two reasons. First of all, it's okay to have desires. And second of all, it avoids distractions. So if you go to somebody and say, look, you've got to clean the dishes every night, otherwise we'll get cockroaches. Well, now you can have a whole conversation about the likelihood of cockroaches, how to handle cockroaches. Do you already have cockroaches? I mean, like, the discussion could go on a completely different tangent, and the two of you can end up in the kitchen screaming about bug infestations when really all you want is to have the dishes washed every day. So you lead with a request, because nobody can deny your desire. This is what I want. Well, it's silly. Well, it doesn't matter if it's silly. It's what I want. So own your own responsibility. The second element of a great request: avoid yes or no questions. Don't go with a yes or no, and the reason for that is it closes the conversation off. And if he says no, the conversation's over. What are you going to do? If he says yes, that could be a good thing, but it might be, sometimes we all do this. We'll say yes to somebody just to get them off our back. We don't mean it. And then you're going to think the problem's handled, and it's not handled, and we're back on that resentment train of aggravation and frustration. So avoid yes or no, and then invite your partner to be part of the solution. So here's some bad requests. Honey, why can't you ever put your clothes in the hamper? I mean, that's not even like a question. Honey, can you please just put your dirty clothes in the hamper at night? Or even, hey, can you put your clothes in the dirty hamper at night? That's a yes or no. It might need to be asked every night. Do you really want to do that? Or, hey, are you willing to put your dirty clothes in the hamper? Yeah, sure, he's willing. That doesn't mean he's going to do it. Here's the powerful request. Honey, I don't like seeing your dirty clothes on the floor, but I resent it when I have to put them in the hamper for you. How can you and I work together to solve this problem? So, but how can you and I work together? That's the key piece. And I use this a lot on customer service calls, because it reminds the person on the end of the line that you're not their enemy. It's so powerful when you ask a person to help you, because you're bringing them onto your team and you're making them feel like, hey, we got this. I got your back, you got my back. We're together in this. So own your responsibility. What do you want? I want the dishes washed every night and put away. I don't have time to do that because I am busily bathing the 5 children that we had. How can you and I solve this problem of the dishes? And you'll notice you're not asking him to do it necessarily. That may be the goal, but let's remember, your desire is probably not about, you probably don't actually want your husband to be, just doing everything you say. Maybe you want the kids to be involved in the cleanup process. Maybe you want him to see that you need to hire a maid. Whatever it is, when you come at it with this powerful request of saying, this is what I want, it's not happening, so it's a problem. How can we work together to solve this problem? You're opening up a whole world of possibility. And again, that's empowering, that's respectful. And, stereotypically, so generally true, but not always true, men like to solve problems. So when you come to him with a problem, I want this, it isn't happening, How can you help me fix it? It's like Christmas Day for most men. My wife wants me to help her solve a problem. I can fix something. I'm a fixer, right? And that's not true of all men. It's true of a lot of women too. So I really don't like stereotypes, but that is a pretty common one. So I want you to think about that. Making this powerful request of what is it that you want? It's not happening. How can the two of you partner to solve this problem? It's a beautiful thing. It does require a little bit of pre-planning because you have to think about what is it that you want? What is this outcome you want that you're not sure you can get by setting a boundary? Why is it not happening? Is it because you don't want to? One thing that my husband and I have generally agreed on is that if I cook, he'll clean up. And if he cooks, I clean up. Because if you've cooked a whole meal, you're too tired to clean up. So that's another part of the powerful request is why is what you want not happening? And then this invitation to be a partner in the solution. You may be really surprised when you come at your spouse with a powerful request. You may be very surprised by the creative solutions they come up with, things that you may not have thought of. And again, this is what builds that respect and that trust and that love that are the foundations of all healthy, wonderful marriages. So that's all the material I have for today. It's been about 30 minutes. I know everyone's busy, so I like to keep my webinars to about 30 to 40 minutes. I do encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to read your husband training ebook, go ahead and look through that. Start implementing some of these things. And please, let's talk. Go to talkwithelaine.com and book a free 1-hour conversation with me. I would love to talk about this material more. I'd love to help you think through what's going on in your relationship and how you can use boundaries, communication, and powerful requests to improve and bring the respect and love back into your relationships. So just a little wrap up. Communication. Communication fails because we think we are mind readers, and we're not. So be very specific, and don't be afraid to ask a lot of questions. Boundaries. Boundaries do not control outcomes. They do not control behavior, but they do influence behavior. And you want to make sure that when you set a boundary, you're okay with every possible outcome, and you let that boundary play out to completion before you intervene or change the boundary. Also remember that boundaries can be changed. I recently had an experience where in the chore wars, my husband and I negotiated an agreement around a couple sets of chores, and what we'd worked out, the boundary we set, it just didn't work for me. There was the outcome that was happening, I couldn't handle it. I just couldn't handle it. And I thought about it and I thought about it. And finally I said, nope, it doesn't work. And I went to him and I said, look, this isn't working for me. And it's not working for you. So forget it. We need to renegotiate these chores because this isn't working for the two of us. That's the wonderful thing about boundaries is you set them and then you can reset them. And then third, the powerful request. I want this. It's not happening. How can you and I work together to make this happen? These 3 tools can build a lot of respect and bring back some love into your marriage. And that's what I want for all of you. I want you to have that happy, mutually satisfying, respect-filled, loving relationship. So if you have questions or you want to talk about this some more, go to talkwithelaine.com. I'd love to talk to you. I do have some slots that I've been opening up for some conversations. So please go to talkwithelaine.com. Let's schedule a time, hook up, and talk. And I hope you have a great day. If you're living in the Raleigh area, I think we're all hoping that we get a little bit of snow, but not too much snow. So stay safe and stay warm. Go to talkwithelaine.com. And this is Elaine Bayless with Inspired Coaching. Have a great day.